This handsome fellow is Mr. T, my most successful racing teapot. He's won every event that he's entered so far, and also took home the 2024 Ministry of Steampunk Creativity Award for Best Racing Teapot. In this video, I'm going to show and tell you a bit about how he was put together. Under his cheerful novelty teapot body shell, you'll see that he runs a Tamiya M03 chassis. This I chose because Tamiya parts are generally quite easily available, and I didn't want to build something on a chassis that would potentially break down and not be repairable in days to come. Tamiya chassis also work a bit like Lego in that you can take different pieces from different models and put them together in different configurations. This is what allowed me to turn what is normally a front-wheel drive, front-wheel steer chassis into a rear-wheel drive chassis with four-wheel steering, which makes an excellent basis for a racing teapot. The M03 has been around for quite a while and has been used on many of Tamiya's smaller models, some of which have become quite collectible. A model depicting a classic full-size car in an iconic livery, such as this Mini Cooper in Monte Carlo Rally trim, might cost well into three figures. However, don't let this put you off. The same chassis has been used on less desirable and therefore less pricey models, such as this Suzuki Swift, which cost the grand total of £50 on clearance from a hobby shop. If you're willing to explore the used market, you can get even better bargains. For example, this slightly shabby looking, but still quite serviceable Mini was picked up from a car boot sale for about £30. I have yet to be so lucky myself, but I know of people who have picked them up for under a tenner from charity shops, or rescued them for free from rubbish skips. However you acquire your M03, chances are you will receive it looking something like this, with a steering servo set up driving the steering apparatus connected to the front wheels, a speed controller and a receiver attached somewhere on the body, and a very simple rear end with an open space back here and no steering apparatus fitted. These are all things which are going to change when we turn it into a racing teapot. As you can see, this is Mr. T's chassis here, and it features quite a few differences. The most noticeable is probably that it is the other way around. What is the front on a standard M03 has become the rear on Mr. T, and vice versa. The rear is now the front. This means that the driven wheels are now at the back, which makes it far easier for the car to climb over obstacles. As the car goes up a hill, the weight is transferred to the rear wheels, which, if it's front-wheel drive, means that the wheels with the most grip aren't doing anything useful. However, if it's a rear-wheel drive, the wheels with the most grip going up a hill are the ones applying drive to the ground. Another difference you might notice is that Mr. T has a second steering servo. The normal one is still in its normal place, albeit now at the back of the chassis, but a second one has been fitted in this open space over here. The M03 chassis dates from the early days of model car racing, when the standard means of controlling throttle was with a mechanical speed controller that relied on a servo driving a wiper arm. Modern radio-controlled cars use electronic speed controllers instead, such as these. However, the M03 chassis still has that space available for the second servo. We use that servo space to mount what has now become our front steering servo. The steering apparatus is connected via push rods. This is exactly the same apparatus as is normally installed on the front, i.e. now the back, and you can pick up these spare parts from most model shops quite cheaply. Another quite noticeable difference is the tyres. M03 chassis usually come with quite small low-profile tyres. However, if you fit some tyres like these, which are sold on eBay quite cheaply as fitting 1/10 scale rally cars, you get more ground clearance and more grip. Loads of styles are available, and if you're willing to wait for postage from China, they cost next to nothing. Of course, turning a front-wheel drive car into a rear-wheel drive car requires more than just turning it around through 180 degrees. You also need it to run forwards when you tell it to and backwards when you tell it to, and that changes around when you go from front to rear-wheel drive. To achieve that, it's quite simple. Just swap these two motor wires around, so hook positive to negative and negative to positive, and that way, when you tell the car to go forwards, it'll go that way instead of that way. You now have a rear-wheel drive car. You'll also notice that the two cars have different shaped bumpers on the front. The standard MO3 bumper has a flat surface, and when you're running into obstacles, that tends to bring the car to a stop. A more useful bumper for teapot racing is something with a curve to it, which helps the car ride up and over obstacles rather than being stopped by them. Something else you might want to change for teapot racing is the gearing. Most MO3s come with either 18 or 20 tooth motor pinions, which give them quite a turn of speed, but less acceleration and less hill climbing ability than you might want for a racing teapot. If you convert to a 16 tooth pinion, that gives you less top speed, but greater acceleration and more climbing power. You do this by taking the motor out by undoing these two screws, swapping over the pinion, which is a little cogwheel kept in place by a grub screw, and putting the motor back in using different screw holes. If you look closely at the chassis, you can see each pair of screw holes is marked with a number. Simply use the screw holes that correspond with the number of teeth on your motor pinion, and you'll get a good solid gear mesh. Once you have your MO3 turned around through 180 degrees so that the front becomes the back, you have your motor wires swapped over so that it goes forwards, which is now the new backwards, and backwards, which is now the new forwards, when you tell it to. You fitted your nice big knobbly tyres. You've got a swooping up front bumper to help climb over obstacles. You've got a second servo fitted, connected to a second set of steering gear for four-wheel steering. You're then ready to start looking at the body shell, the bit that makes it look like a teapot. Vehicle-shaped novelty teapots are nothing new. I rather like the delivery van-shaped ones made by carters of Suffolk, for example. With this in mind, I decided to make my racing teapot look like a delivery van. There aren't very many delivery vans active in racing circles, but I do know of one Morris Minor van which has proven quite successful. So, of course, my racing teapot needed to be based on a Morris Minor. In terms of colour scheme, that was an easy choice. I simply made it look like a red Yorkshire tea teapot. Of course, you don't need to make your teapot look like a novelty delivery van. If you don't want to, there are many options for a teapot body for your vehicle. However, the one which I used started off like this. It looks a bit like a jelly mould, and you can use it as such. It's a hollow Morris Minor van shaped plastic moulding made by a British cottage industry called Cantec. They have them in all sorts of styles, so if you fancy something different to a Morris Minor, have a look at their webpage and pick one that you like. It's made out of ABS, the same stuff as plasticard is made of, so you can glue bits to it using plastic cement. That's what I did to give it its spout and handle, thus turning it from a Morris Minor van into a Morris Minor van shaped novelty teapot. Once you have made and attached your accessories, it's then just a case of cutting off the bits of plastic around the bottom and around the wheel arches that you don't need, drilling some holes in it so that it can mount on the posts which are part of your chassis, and there you go. You are ready to race. So there you have it. In summary, we have a Tamiya MO3 chassis set up for rear-wheel drive with big knobbly tyres, a kick-up front bumper, extra servo for four-wheel steering, swapped motor polarity so it goes forwards and backwards as you'd want it to, with a novelty teapot shaped body shell made out of a commercially available moulding, with accessories added including a handle and spout, and in this case a little hat to represent the lid. The body shell fits on top of the chassis. Not the easiest of things to do. It needs to align the posts that are part of the chassis with the holes that are made in the body, and one then applies little clips to each post to stop the body from falling off again, and you're good to go.